Hello friends, how are you doing today? My name is Sive and this is Stories in Sive, my booktube channel. I talk about books on here and this video is going to be a wrap up for the month of July. I read a lot of books in July and I'm pretty pleased with what I was able to pick up. The focus of this month was definitely trying to reduce my physical TBR a little bit more, and I read a good amount of horror and thrillers as well as fantasy, so let's get into it. The first book I finished is Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare. And it feels like an age since I finished this book. I finished this book maybe the first or second day of July, and I've been listening to it via audiobook for a couple of days, like probably a week before I finished it. So this is the second book to the Infernal Devices series. This is my first time reading this series. I enjoyed the plot of this a little bit. Mostly, I'm just invested now in the romances and the relationship between the different characters. I'm invested in the side characters' own plots, which was explored a lot more in this book than it was the first book. This is a YA fantasy series. It's a trilogy. It's very steampunk. It's very like gothic London alternate universe type of thing. There are creatures and mechanics and there's a bad guy. It's great. It's just such a good time. It's definitely not the best series, the best fantasy I've ever read, but as far as pure enjoyment factor, it's really up there, and I gave this 4 stars. The next book I read in July was Cross Her Heart by Sarah Pinborough, which is a thriller that if you watch some of my videos, you will know that I was a bit disappointed by. I enjoy Sarah Pinborough's writing, I really do, but this one just fell flat. It was very formulaic. It was about a mom and her daughter and just their complicated relationship, and the mom has some secrets and the secrets come back to haunt her. She's definitely like running from something. You can very much tell that she is a paranoid woman, and it rubs off negatively on her relationship with her daughter. I liked it for entertainment wise, and I think I could suggest this tentatively. Trigger warnings, please go look those up because this was quite a dark book and dealt with some really tough subjects. But I do feel that for those who are newer to the mystery thriller genre, this could be a good one for people to pick up. However, I'm learning that I like something a little bit extra, a little bit speculative, or maybe over the top, if not speculative, in my thrillers. This was definitely a mystery, not a thriller, and it could have been my expectations, but I didn't enjoy it, and I gave it 2 stars. Ooh, next was It Came with the Crash by Boris Basic, and this is a horror novel by an author I've never heard of before. I was scrolling through Hoopla, and I wanted a free audiobook that I could download and listen to that same day. That was just horror and super weird. So I saw this series called Creature Encounters, and I love a monster horror, and that's exactly what this book was, and so I picked it up. It was great. Like, it wasn't amazing, but like as good as it could have gone for picking a random book by a random author I've never heard of before. It was about a plane crash and a group of people are stranded on a remote island with no way to get in contact with civilization. But it was more than just being like a Lord of the Flies situation where there's complicated relationship and tension. Obviously this is a very heightened situation, and people react very differently to stress and fear and death around them. So I enjoyed some of those character dynamics the same way I enjoyed Lord of the Flies, but there was the added element of a monster of some sort that comes in the night and hunts them down one by one. It was terrifying. It was like really good at playing on depth and darkness as far as like a physical setting. Boris Basic is pretty good at putting you in the shoes of the character and showing you what they are seeing and what they're not seeing and crafting this ambiance that is just like a terrifying silence, and I loved it. I ate it up. Looking back, I feel like I might have been a little harsh. I gave this 3 stars, but like as I think about my experience, it's possible that it could be a 4 from me, and this really did exactly what I wanted it to do. It wasn't like the best writing, and there were a couple of characters and perspectives that I felt could have had a little bit more of a nuance. It was very like tongue-in-cheek, kind of slap in the face, and I like the stuff that is unsaid. This dialogue was not like that at all, so I think in the moment I was very like, oh, I'm not enjoying this that much, but like ultimately it did what I wanted it to do. I really enjoyed this, and if you are looking for a monster horror, Boris Basic is where it's at. The next book I finished in July is QBQ by John Miller. If you saw my July TBR, this is a book that I was going through with my team at work. Practicing personal accountability at work and in life, the question behind the question, what to really ask yourself to eliminate: blame, victim thinking, complaining, and procrastination. So it's very short, and the margins are quite large, the chapters are really short, pretty easy to digest. It's like baby pieces for you to chew on, and then discuss later with a group of people. So it was good. I don't really have too much to say about this book. If you're interested in business or help books like this, feel free to pick it up. I don't know if I would widely recommend this. On to Echoes and Empires by Morgan Rhodes, which is the first book in a new fantasy series by this author. This is a 2022 release. It's about a character who lives in a society where magic is illegal. Magical beings and people and practices are definitely around, but they've been forced underground by the current queen. On to our main character, Jocelyn. She's been raised in this society where magic is unacceptable and actually taught to be very feared. It is an evil thing that only does harm and corrupts. So when she stumbles upon a thief stealing a magical artifact and accidentally gets infected by said magic, she has to go on this quest and is hiding it from her friends and her queen to avoid being punished. Jericho the thief ends up finding her and decides to take her on a quest to figure out a way to get this stuff out of her because he wants it for his own purposes. He was trying to steal it in the first place. So it was crazy. It was kind of weird. It was definitely not the best writing. It was very YA, young adult in style, and I think that can work really well. However, just this character was really, really selfish. I didn't see a whole lot of character growth, and I don't really have high expectations for first books in series anymore. Pretty much solidly, I give them all 3 stars, and that's exactly what I gave this. Next book I read in July is The River of Silver by S.A. Chakraborty. I promise I won't talk too much more about this book, but the Daevabad trilogy is a high fantasy, epic fantasy story, and it is about djinn and magic and politics. It is a multiple perspective story that I fell in love with in 2020 and have since reread multiple times. This is a collection of short stories written by the author. She decides to explore a lot of the different scenes that you didn't get, a lot of the different perspectives and side characters, where they were at during this battle, where they were at after this scene, and it's just so, for someone who is very incredibly attached to the way the relationships were crafted in Daevabad, this was equally hopeful as it was heartbreaking. I ate this up. I gave this book 5 stars. It might be my favorite book of the year this year. I received this arc after entering into a giveaway that was done on S.A. Chakraborty's Instagram, and I won it. And she sent a signed copy saying, "Welcome back to Daevabad, and if you enjoy Daevabad like I do, please pick this up." On to the next, which is When Angels Speak of Love by Bell Hooks, which is a collection of poetry that I read. It's 50 poems that have to do with love, loss, sexuality, and sensuality, intimacy, and it was okay. I feel unusual talking about poetry because what I connect with is not what everyone else will connect with, and what someone else will connect with might not be what I connect with. And I have to say, I did not connect very much to the loss and heartbreak. It's just not really been a very large part of my life. However, I can see this book as being a very good piece of healing. Just a way to feel seen by someone who is going through something like this. So when I tell you I gave it 3 stars, that doesn't mean it isn't good quality. I'm just speaking from my personal reading experience as a whole, and that has to do with connection, especially with poetry, and that's why I gave it 3 stars. I appreciate everyone who commented that I should read Feminism is for Everyone on my TBR when I talked about this book. Bell Hooks is definitely going to be an author I keep reading from, so this is just the beginning. The next book I read was An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon. This is a adult sci-fi novel that follows our main character, Aster. She is a black woman, she's not neurotypical, and the setting is the SS Matilda, which is basically a futuristic spaceship that is transferred from Earth like hundreds of years ago and is just traveling in space, and there's different like sections of it. There's A through Z. People are being sectioned off by color, and it is a reflection of the antebellum South. Aster's character is a healer, and she works alongside a doctor. And she services most of the blocks and has seen a lot of death, a lot of pain, and she actually gets in trouble quite a lot with the guards. I enjoyed the story so much. The writing was really difficult for me to get into. We're reading from a perspective of someone who is not neurotypical, and I am neurotypical, so just because that I didn't get it doesn't mean it's a bad book. Her way of speaking, and especially her inner monologue, was very choppy. It was very statement after statement. She takes things very literally. There's a little bit of humor in her, but you don't see it come out too much. I don't think that the writing style that I had a problem getting into had to do with Aster's inner monologue. It was just the writing of the whole book. However, I am so happy that I pushed through, and once I kind of got my brain in a rhythm that it was processing this writing style a little more smoothly, I ended up just loving this book. I gave this book 4 stars. This is such a beautiful story, a very important story, and there's a mystery element, and there's a speculative magic element as well. It's just a little bit of everything, and I really enjoyed River Solomon's previous release, which is Saarland. For those of you who don't know, this book has been on my TBR for quite some time. I'm so excited to have read it, and I ended up loving it too. Okay, next, it's another Boris Basic. So I ended up just listening to both of his audiobooks. Okay, the other one from the Creature Encounter series I was talking about earlier is They Came from the Ocean, and wow. This book follows our main character as she's coming back to work at an underwater facility after she has had an extensive amount of time off after the death of her father. She's coming back, and again, underwater, 5,000 feet under the ocean, and she's been doing this for quite some time. When she is traveling down and she gets to the facility, she is told by a person in power, like an administrative person, that one of their technicians who went out into the field underwater to fix something went missing, and they hadn't been able to contact him for 20 hours, I think, and they presume him dead because the oxygen in his tank only lasts like 6 hours, I think. However, the station is thrown into panic when they receive a distress signal from him 20 hours after he went missing. A team goes out to rescue him, and there's the obvious horror of being underwater, but then there is a monster that is hunting them, and they get picked off one by one, and it's just truly terrifying. Again, I see that I've only given this book 3 stars looking back and prepping for this video, but I think one of the things that I really took issue with was, one, again, the writing isn't the best. Some of the situations, I just don't think it was very, okay, well, it's not fair for me to expect something realistic from characters when there's a monster hunting them at the bottom of the ocean. But I mean, even in some character growth and development, I'm like, you're a 28, 29-year-old person and you talk like that and you think like that? I don't know. I think I just think too much about that when it comes to character development. I'm so sorry. The main reason I gave this 3 stars is because there was a sex scene in a really dangerous situation. And I hate that in horror and in thrillers. I've never felt that a sex scene when there is something terrifying going on or they're under a time crunch has ever contributed positively to my reading experience, to the growth of the characters, to the plot, or the furthering of the getting accomplished, what needs to get accomplished. So I just really have grown to hate it in books. I've never really seen it done well, in my opinion. So it really just rubs me the wrong way, and this book had that. I don't know. That's how I feel. Let me know how you feel about that, but I ended up giving this book 3 stars. And again, I really do love this Creature Encounter series. For what it was, which was monster horror, it was great. Okay guys, we're closing in on the end here. So the second to last book that I read was Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. Horror novella, listen to the audiobook, And boy, this freaked me out, y'all. I've read 2 other Stephen Graham Jones, so this is my 3rd, and I gave the first one I read 2 stars, the second one I read 3 stars, and I've given this one 4 stars. So we're getting there. I'm not giving up on Stephen Graham Jones, and I was floored by this audiobook. The crafting of atmosphere and of suspense was peak level. One of the reasons why I love horror so much is because it just is able to craft that space where you just have to sit there and endure. The novella itself follows a young man and his group of friends, and a while ago, maybe a couple summers ago, they played with this mannequin, and they had found it in like a dumpster and like put it on a bike and took it fishing with them, and it was just like they're kids, they're just like a companion with them. And then they found him again a couple summers later and decided to play a prank on one of their friends who worked in a movie theater. So the prank goes wrong, and basically the mannequin is coming after them in a certain sense. That's all I can say about the book. Please pick it up if you have any interest in, again, this is kind of that monster horror vibe that I've really been loving lately. Gave this 4 stars, I really loved it. And the last book I read in July was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. This is a very well-known and widely recommended literary fiction story. It was written in the 70s, and then there's a foreword in this edition that Toni Morrison did in like 1993. This story follows a number of different characters and sends you through the different seasons of 1 year in total. This was so hypnotizing. These characters, I will think about them forever. Let me just read you the synopsis. It's a story of 11-year-old Pecola Breedlove, a black girl in an America whose love for its blonde, blue-eyed children can devastate all others, who prays for her eyes to turn blue so that she will be beautiful, so that people will look at her, so that her world will be different. This is the story of the nightmare at the heart of her yearning and the tragedy of its fulfillment. Like, that's all you need to know to go into this. The only other thing that I would suggest you know, I would struggle to just widely recommend this because of the amount of trigger warnings. Please do not read this book without knowing exactly what horrors you're about to read, because though this is literary fiction, there is some true abuse that happens in this book, and it is terrifying and heartbreaking, and it's not exactly the most hopeful book that I've ever read. I'm so glad I read this, and I gave it 4 stars. So that's it. Those are the 11 books that I read this past month. I read so much. I normally like stay with like that 6 to 8 range. But I read a lot this month, and it did have to do with just trying to get some of these off of my physical TBR. I think I did pretty good. Let me know what was your favorite thing that you read in July, and if you also had a disappointing book, let me know. Thank you guys very much for joining me for this video. If you are not subscribed already, please feel free to do so. I upload bookish content, and if you've watched this video, that means you like bookish content. So, love you very much. Thanks again for watching, and other than that, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!